Welcome to the Chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 34 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half, and you can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. I'm flying solo today as we preview these Week 17 games. And so before we get to that, though, this podcast is going out live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. So drop us a comment. I'd love to interact with you guys live on the air here. If you are listening later on Apple Podcasts, we really appreciate that as well. Be sure you give us a 5-star rating and review. And so let's get into it. Week 17 normally would be the last week of the NFL season, but it is the penultimate week of NFL action before the playoffs. And due to the virtue of expanding to a 7 seed this season, 24 of the 32 teams are still alive in the playoff race. So I didn't look up the stats, but I can't ever remember us being this deep in the season and only having 8 teams mathematically eliminated. Now, some of these teams need a long shot miracle to get there, but it's at least possible. 24 teams, hopes are still alive, although a lot of those hopes will be snuffed out this weekend. And so let's get into it. This will be a little bit more abbreviated show as I'm flying solo today, but I want to give you guys some idea of what you can expect this weekend. And so for our first game, as we always do, let's talk about the Philadelphia Eagles matchup against the Washington football team. Now, there may not be a lot to talk about because these two teams played just 2 weeks ago, even a little less than 2 weeks ago, because it was postponed to a Tuesday night game. And I've already aired my grievances with the NFL scheduling committee about how this works, but you should never play the same team twice in 3 weeks. I would love to see a schedule set up where every season opened with 3 divisional games and then closed with 3 divisional games. Just space it out, let it bookend the season, however you want to do it. And especially for Washington, who played Dallas, Philly. It's just poor. It's poor viewership for the fans. It's bad to talk about because we just talked about it. But so there's really not a lot to say. We've covered a lot of this. But I think one of the biggest keys for this game for the Eagles is going to be, can the Eagles' running game work against Washington's front 7? Even with Chase Young out, Washington still has a great defensive front when they're not throwing punches at each other on the sideline. In Week 15, the Eagles had a lot of success on the ground against this front. They rushed for 238 yards, but it remains a very good defensive front and one that has seen the creativity of the Eagles' rushing attack now. And, we'll see what adjustments they can make to stop it. Miles Sanders is out for this game, which is definitely a blow to the Eagles. I don't think it's a death blow as long as Jordan Howard's able to play and is healthy. He's practicing now. I think he's trending towards playing, but it is a little concerning that there's not a lot behind there. If Jordan Howard goes down, you're down to Boston Scott, Kenny Gainwell, who's a guy that the coaching staff really doesn't seem to trust. And then I guess they signed Kerryon Johnson this week. And so Kerryon Johnson, his career could carry on, pardon the pun, with the Eagles this week. So he's a guy that was signed in the offseason that a lot of people thought was going to make this team, and he just never really panned out. But he's going to get his shot this week, potentially, as the Eagles come in shorthanded in the running game. Another thing to keep an eye on for the offense is going to be the health of Jalen Hurts. Last week, he only attempted to run the ball 2 times against the Giants. Now, whether that was by design or not, we're not sure. His ankle looked fine on Tuesday night against the football team, but against the Giants on Sunday, he didn't look to be his normal self in terms of mobility. So maybe Sirianni wanted to keep him in the pocket. Maybe they wanted to get some different looks, but I can't help but shake the feeling that something happened that limited his mobility in that game. And so we'll see if he's recovered there, if he can be a force in the ground game as well. And you really want to see him start to do better when he's asked to pass the ball. The Giants game was rough passing for Hurts, especially in the first half. And even in the second half, it wasn't as good as a lot of people have made it out to be. And so going into the playoffs, you can't afford to score 3 points in the first half. You can't afford to only be able to run the ball. You're going to fall in a hole in a playoff game. You're going to have a team take away what you want to do in running the ball, especially if you end up matched up with the Buccaneers, who have Vita Vea in the interior, or the Rams, who have Aaron Donald. You're going to have to be able to throw. And so I would like to see the Eagles make some strides there. Dallas Goddard is a guy that should definitely be targeted a lot in this game. Goddard caught 7 passes for 135 yards in Week 15. Washington simply doesn't have a linebacker who can cover him. They drafted Jamin Davis in the first round. He's coming along, but they just don't have the horses to be able to keep up. And so this should be a big Dallas Goddard game. And Goddard has quietly had a really good year. He got paid, and I think a lot of people have, thought maybe he didn't make the biggest impact, but he is fifth among all tight ends in the NFL right now in terms of receiving yards with 759 yards. And that's despite the very run-heavy approach that the Eagles have deployed. And Goddard's a great run blocker. So he's a key part of this offense. Honestly, he might be he's probably the most important skill position player on this roster right now. And so Dallas Goddard needs to get going. On the defensive side of the ball, there's really just not a lot to be concerned about with Washington. Now, this is the type of game the Eagles could come in and lose like they did in Week 13 against the Giants, because it's the Eagles and you're always a little concerned about that. But Washington just doesn't really have a lot of threats here. Ron Rivera said earlier in the week that Taylor Heineke was going to start, but said that Kyle Allen was going to play too, and that Kyle Allen might get the start in Week 18. The front office later walked those comments back. I'm not sure what to make of that, but it sounds like this Washington team that technically still has shot at the playoffs if they went out and get a lot of things to fall in their favor. It sounds like they are counting their season over and the tank could be on in Washington. So whether Heineke plays the whole game, whether Allen plays, I don't know what's going to shake out there, but this is a team that the Eagles should be able to handle easily. Terry McLaurin is the only legitimate threat on this offense through the air. He's got 66 receptions for 899 yards and 5 touchdowns, all of which lead the football team. The next closest player who's not injured, because J.D. McKissick would be next, but he's injured. The next closest player is little Adam Humphreys, a rookie receiver or second-year receiver. I can't remember now. Out of Texas. He has 38 receptions for 236 yards on the year. So there's not a lot to be afraid of in the passing game. Antonio Gibson has been a threat on the ground this season. He's a guy that's good catching the ball out of the backfield. He's a dynamic runner, but in Week 15, he was held to 26 yards on 15 carries. And so the defense should have a good game against the football team. You hope to see Fletcher Cox continue to play well. He's really come on the last couple of weeks. Hopefully Josh Sweat can get something going off of the edge. And, hopefully the Eagles are in a position where they can win this game. They can get some starters out, in the second half. And this is not a game that's ever in doubt. One final thing to look at here is the special teams. Against the Giants last week, Jalen Reagor was finally moved off of kickoff duty and replaced by Kenny Gainwell, who promptly fumbled the opening kickoff. Now, the Eagles were fortunate enough to recover, but special teams has been a thorn in the side of the Eagles all season. They have really struggled in both the punt and kick return games. Their punting and their field goal kicking has been really good, but then even last week, Jake Elliott misses a field goal. He goes 2 of 3. Now, the field goal that he missed, it was kind of a botched snap or hold. I couldn't tell, but I saw the ball slip out. Maybe not Elliott's fault, but the special teams is something that has to be cleared up. We've talked before that if you're going to try to win a game based on the strength of a running attack, a rushing quarterback, a run-heavy attack, you have to have everything else fall into place, and you cannot be giving possessions away because of special teams. And so the Eagles, although they can make those mistakes against the Giants, they can make those mistakes against Washington. That's not a mistake they can make against Dallas or against the Rams or against the Buccaneers in Wild Card Weekend and hope to win the game. And so speaking of the playoffs, the Eagles have a path to clinch in Week 17 and render their Week 18 meeting with Dallas pointless. The way they do that is if they win this game, and then it needs to be coupled with a Green Bay Packers victory over Minnesota and a Carolina victory over New Orleans. And so next, let's dive into those games. So Carolina travels to New Orleans on Sunday. Sam Darnold is starting this game. Cam Newton is not. Matt Rule is comparing himself to Jay-Z and talking about how he needs 7 years to build his program. I don't know. The Matt Rule coaching life has to be on life support now, but I don't know what the Panthers are going to do here. But Darnold is going to start the game, which obviously is not good news. We've seen how he's played earlier in the year, but the Panthers really don't have another choice. Fortunately for them, they're playing the Saints, who also don't have a quarterback to speak of. They have Trevor Siemian and Taysom Hill both back. They get to choose from them, but the Saints haven't scored a touchdown, period. Not a first half touchdown. They haven't scored a touchdown, period, in their last 2 games. I don't think that trend really changes much. I'm not saying they get shut out or don't score a touchdown, but I think Carolina, I think they can win this game at the Superdome. And so if they win this game, then it moves to Green Bay and Minnesota. If the Green Bay Packers can beat the Minnesota Vikings, then the Eagles can clinch a playoff berth in Week 17. And then news comes out this week that Kirk Cousins, who is an unvaccinated player, contracted COVID, and he is now ruled out for Sunday. And so rookie Kellen Mond will get the start in Minnesota. He's going to go up against Aaron Rodgers, who has 16 touchdowns and 0 interceptions since Week 10. He's making a strong case to be the back-to-back MVP, and he's going against a rookie day 2 draft pick, making his first start. It's not as if the Packers don't have a lot to play for either, that they're going to let this one go by. This is a rivalry game. It's at home, and they can clinch the 1 seed if they win and Dallas loses, which would be huge for the Packers. Aaron Rodgers has the fractured pinky toe that's been hampering him for weeks. He's said that if they could get 1 game off, that he could have surgery on the toe and he can make it back without missing a game. Well, if the Packers win and Dallas loses, not only can they pull Rodgers for Week 18, but he also would have a bye week. And so presumably Aaron Rodgers, under that circumstance, he could go get surgery on his toe and have almost 3 weeks off to heal from an injury he said he could come back from in 2 weeks. And so huge stakes for the Packers, huge stakes for Aaron Rodgers. They're going to take care of business against Minnesota. And so the biggest thing for me is that Carolina-New Orleans game. Can Carolina beat New Orleans? And we'll just have to wait to find out. But my official prediction is that the Eagles will clinch a playoff spot. They'll clinch the 7 seed this week, and they'll have nothing to play for in Week 18. Now let's throw it around the rest of the NFL. We've got the Atlanta Falcons traveling to Buffalo. Atlanta has 1 win over a team with a winning record this season. My co-host Mark Henry Jr. has said before that Matt Ryan would never quarterback another team with a winning record. That's still a possibility for Atlanta, but they would have to get by Buffalo here, and I just don't see it happen. But Buffalo's coming off a win over the Patriots where they didn't even punt the ball, something that's never happened against a Bill Belichick defense before. Buffalo is favored by 14 in this game. That tells you everything that you need to know about where Vegas has this pegged, where the sports community in general has this pegged. I think Buffalo wins this game easily and moves on to Week 18. Up next, we have the New York Giants at the Chicago Bears. This is a likely showdown between Mike Glennon and Nick Foles. Riveting, must-see TV. Now, there's a chance Justin Fields goes in this game, but I think it's unlikely. And so you're probably going to see Foles and Glennon battle it out. Now, both of these teams would be better off losing this game. They're both out of playoff contention. They both need to retool their rosters. They both should fire their coaches, although only the Bears are likely going to do that. And so we'll see what happens in this one. I think the Giants probably find a way to lose this game. It's in Soldier Field. It's at Chicago. You know, Nick Foles with the December magic, I think he's going to lead the Bears to a second straight win, which would probably prompt Matt Nagy to make him the all-season starter next year if he were to return. An interesting side thing from this, you know, Evan Ingram, he's not an elite tight end in the NFL. When he came out in the draft, people thought his athleticism was going to make him this elite playmaker, and he's not. But he is one of only 3 tight ends in the league, along with Travis Kelce and George Kittle, who has 40-plus receptions in each of the last 5 seasons. So he has been a volume target for Daniel Jones and for this Giants floundering offense, and I think you're going to see a heavy dose of him with Mike Glennon on Sunday. Up next, we have the Kansas City Chiefs at the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, this game should be a really good game to watch. The Chiefs are looking like favorites to win the Super Bowl after they started the season rough. After we all pronounced them dead, they went on an 8-game winning streak. They're playing great defense now. And the offense seemed to get back on track last week against the Steelers, who admittedly have a really poor rush defense, but Patrick Mahomes and the offense looked really good as well. Joe Burrow versus Patrick Mahomes is going to be a brilliant battle to watch. Last week, Joe Burrow became the only player in NFL history to throw for 525 yards, 4 touchdowns, and no interceptions in a game. Now, it was against a Ravens secondary that was basically all practice squad players, but it's still an impressive performance, and he's going to ride that hot hand at home against a resurgent Chiefs defense, and he's going to try to outduel Patrick Mahomes in a game that would clinch the AFC North for Cincinnati if they win. Meanwhile, Patrick Mahomes can tie Dan Marino's records for the fewest games taken to reach 150 touchdown passes if he tosses 3 touchdowns against the Bengals on Sunday. Up next, we have the Miami Dolphins at the Tennessee Titans. Miami is the only team in NFL history with a 7-game losing streak and a 7-game winning streak in the same seasons. They could become the only team in NFL history to make the playoffs after starting 1-7 if they can beat the Titans this week and the Patriots next week. Unfortunately for Miami, only one of those 7 wins in that winning streak came against a team with a winning record. This is a team who has had inept offense. They've played good enough defense to get by against some really poor opponents. Now they're facing the Titans, who are currently the 2 seed in the AFC, but the Titans have looked awful since the Derrick Henry injury. He was their whole offense. Good news for Titans fans is that Ryan Tannehill posted his best game in about 5 or 6 weeks last week against the 49ers, the team with a pretty good defense. And so there are some signs of life in Tennessee. A.J. Brown comes back, and he has a good game. Tennessee needs to find a way to win this game against Miami. Their playoff hopes don't depend on it, but their ability to make a run in the playoffs, they need some confidence here. And so they're going to look to get it against a Miami team who, again, doesn't have the best offense. The one piece of Miami's offense that is working, however, is Jalen Waddle. They traded their first-round pick to move up from 12 to 6 with the Eagles, and they selected Jalen Waddle, who currently needs 6 catches over the last 2 weeks to break Anquan Boldin's record for the most rookie receptions at 101. Moving on, we have the Las Vegas Raiders traveling to Indianapolis. Las Vegas controls their own destiny in the playoffs. If they win out, and that would require closing the season on a 4-game win streak, and they haven't won 4 in a row going back to 2016. But if they can win out, they can make the playoffs despite, their hot start, their midseason slump, they could still get there. They get a gift from the football gods in that Carson Wentz is on the COVID list right now. Now, he could clear by Sunday morning to play, and we won't know anything really until about game time. But if he doesn't play, rookie quarterback Sam Ehlinger will get the start. Now, there were reports that the Colts reached out to Phillip Rivers to try to get him to come back for this game, and I guess Rivers wasn't interested. So Ehlinger is on the chopping block if Carson Wentz can't play. And so you could have Derek Carr against Sam Ehlinger, and that's a decisive QB win for the Raiders. Although I would argue that it's a QB win for the Raiders, even if it's Carr against Wentz. Josh Jacobs in this game only needs 4 yards. He only needs 4 yards in the next 2 weeks combined to join Marcus Allen as the only player in franchise history with 1,000 yards in each of their first 3 seasons. So given the uncertainty at quarterback, I'm going to take the Raiders in this game. I think they win this. If Carson Wentz plays, I would give the edge to the Colts, but that's not something I think you can count on at the moment. And I just realized as I've been going through, I didn't give my official picks on some of these games. So I've got Chicago winning against the Giants. I've got Kansas City beating Cincinnati, and I've got Tennessee beating Miami. And now the Raiders beating the Colts, although if Wentz plays, I would give a slight edge to the Colts. Moving on, we have Jacksonville Jaguars traveling to Foxborough to take on the Patriots, who are reeling after back-to-back losses. 2 weeks ago, they could not stop the Colts on the ground. Last week, they could not stop the Bills through the air. Mac Jones has looked vulnerable in this, and now they face a team in Jacksonville who, fortunately for them, can't run or pass. There's really not much to talk about in this game. New England should win this game easily. They're a well-coached team, even if they are not the most talented team on the field. They are the most talented team on this field. Even if they're not the most talented team in the league, they're well-coached, and Jacksonville is in shambles right now. So New England walks away with an easy win. Up next, we have Tampa Bay traveling to New York to play the Jets. Again, another game that's not going to be worth watching unless maybe you're just a diehard Jets fan that wants to see something. I don't know. This won't be a good game. Even with all their playmakers out for the Buccaneers, Godwin, Evans, and Fournette all out. Antonio Brown comes back. He gets 10 receptions for 101 yards last week. And he's the only option they have, but it's better than anything that the Jets have. For the Jets, one of the lone bright spots this season has been the performance of running back Michael Carter, a guy that if you followed my draft work before I launched this podcast, I was huge on Michael Carter. He's a guy that I really wanted the Eagles to draft. I thought he was a great receiving option out of the backfield, something I thought would complement Miles Sanders really well, who struggles in the passing game. Well, Michael Carter is the only rookie in the league with 500 plus rushing yards and 300 plus receiving yards this season. So that evaluation seems to be spot on. And granted, he's catching lots of checkdowns and things, but that's what you want a running back to be able to do in that sort of an offense. I loved the draft pick for the Jets. I loved his fit with the Eagles, and I wish he was in Philly. Up next, we have the Los Angeles Rams traveling to Baltimore to take on a depleted Ravens team. The Rams got a win last week despite a bad performance from Matthew Stafford, who tossed 3 interceptions. Stafford has been really, I won't even say up and down. He's just been down over the last month and a half of the season. The Rams, you can't feel good as a Rams fan about their playoff chances the way that Matthew Stafford's playing right now. And so this is a chance to sort it out against the same defense that Joe Burrow put up 525 yards against last week. On offense for the Ravens, Lamar Jackson may return. He's been out for a few weeks, but if he does come back, he's not going to be 100%. He's probably going to try to get it out because the Ravens need to win out if they want to get into the playoffs. If he doesn't, though, Tyler Huntley has been cleared from the COVID list. He will start, and he's been remarkably effective. He is the perfect backup for the Ravens, who can run almost the same style of offense, maybe with a few less throws asked of Huntley than Jackson. But he's really a perfect backup for this system. And regardless of who starts, you're going to keep an eye on Mark Andrews in this game. Again, the only real threat that the Ravens have in the passing game. They don't have a lot of good receivers here, and all their running backs are hurt. But Mark Andrews had 8 catches last week for 125 yards and a touchdown. And that made him the only tight end in history, the second tight end in history with 3 straight 100-yard TD games, and Jimmy Graham is the other. So I like the Rams in this game. I like Matthew Stafford to get back on track against this lackluster defense and get the win in Baltimore. Up next, we go to the AFC West with a matchup between the Denver Broncos and the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers get home field advantage in this game if they've ever had home field advantage in their life. The game is played in LA, and the Chargers lost to the Texans last week. One of the most embarrassing losses of the year. They were primed to make the playoffs. Now, after that loss, they have to win out, and they need a Miami and Baltimore loss to get into the playoffs. Now, I think both Miami and Baltimore will lose a game, and so I do think the Chargers hold their own destiny here, but they have to win out. Good news for them is they get Austin Eckler back in this game. Technically, Denver is not eliminated from the playoffs, but they are eliminated they're all but eliminated. They have a slight mathematical chance. And really, I think Denver, they're ready to move on. They need to find a quarterback, and I think this is a team you could see make a play for Aaron Rodgers or for Russell Wilson. They've got a lot of playmakers on offense. They just need a quarterback to pull this team together. And I think most Denver fans' thoughts are already on that quarterback search, not on trying to make the playoffs. Up next, we have Houston at San Francisco. And this game suddenly has intrigue as Davis Mills is maybe good. He was 21-27 for 254 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Brandon Staley Chargers defense last week. I think Davis Mills has done enough to earn a season as the Texans starter next year. I'm not saying they shouldn't go get a vet in free agency as a backup, somebody to push Davis Mills, somebody that's in insurance policy, but the reality is this team is so far away from competing. Whenever they inevitably move Deshaun Watson, they can start to retool this team. But I think you give Davis Mills a shot here. Let him see. I mean, you drafted the guy in the 3rd round. You spent, I think it was your 1st or 2nd overall pick on him in the draft. I think he has earned the spot. Give him a season to start. But he's going to be going against this 49ers defense. And we're not even sure what quarterback he's going to be playing against on the other side. Jimmy G has a torn ligament in his thumb, and his thumb's fractured. So shocking. Jimmy G is hurt come playoff time again. And we're not sure if him or Trey Lance will start. Now, this should be a no-brainer decision for the 49ers. They expended a lot of draft capital to go get Trey Lance. If you are not confident in this guy to start by week 17 over a guy with a torn ligament and fracture in his throwing hand thumb, then it was just one of the worst draft decisions maybe in history. And so the 49ers need to roll out Lance. They need to see what they've got here. But they're in a spot because they can secure a playoff spot with a win and with a Saints loss. And so they want to win now, but Lance is the future. I've said all season that Lance should be the guy out there. I don't know what they're seeing in practice. He's got to look dreadful in practice if you're really having a hard time deciding whether to play him or the shell of Jimmy G with a hurt thumb. But regardless of who plays, I think the 49ers win this game. I don't see Houston replicating their success on the ground from last week against the 49ers. And I really don't think Davis Mills can carry an offense through the air yet. Up next, we have Arizona traveling to Dallas to take on the Cowboys. The Cardinals, they're in the playoffs, but they have lost 3 straight games and they're reeling. Gone are the times that they were the last standing undefeated team. Gone is the stretch where we thought this was a legitimate playoff team. This is a team that every wild card team wants to face in the first round of the playoffs. This is a team that very likely could be one and done. Their offense is floundering. Cliff Kingsbury's whole offensive philosophy is just, Kyler Murray, you go figure it out, you do something. And it's not working. And so the defense hasn't been the same since J.J. Watt went out. DeAndre Hopkins has been out. So they've had some bad injury luck, but a good coach should work with a good quarterback and overcome. And the Cardinals only have one of those things, and it's the good quarterback. And so they're going to go against a red-hot Dallas team that just demolished a dysfunctional Washington football team last week. And it's going to be at home, and Dak's home splits this season are crazy. At home, he's thrown 20 touchdowns. He's added 1 rushing touchdown versus 2 interceptions, and he has a 118 passer rating on the season when playing in Dallas. I think Dallas rolls in this game. They are the type of team that nobody wants to face in the playoffs, as their offense is red hot and their defense has played really well. They've gotten good production from young players in Micah Parsons, who is chasing the rookie sack record, and Trevon Diggs, who, although he's given up a lot of big plays, he is a ball hawk. He makes big plays too, and I think you'll take that from any sort of young cornerback. And so Dallas rolls in this one, and they continue their pursuit of the 1 seed, forcing Green Bay to win in Week 18 to secure the spot. Moving on, we have Detroit at Seattle. Detroit is still battling, but honestly, one should be rooting for a loss here. You want that number 1 pick. Whatever quarterback inevitably shoots up draft boards, or whoever the hot edge rusher is, whether it be Aiden Hutchinson or Kayvon Thibodeau, you want the number 1 pick. So you have the option to take them or to trade down for a big haul. And so, although it's fun to see the win, Detroit fans really should be rooting for a loss here. But, I mean, you can't tell the players that. They're going to want to go out and compete like they have all season. This is likely the ending of both Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll in Seattle. I think Carroll's time has run out. I think he's hampered the Seahawks for years, and I think the Seahawks are starting to realize that. And I think Russell Wilson has realized that, and he just wants out. Now, maybe you could retain Russell Wilson if you make an organizational shift and get a new coach. I don't know, but I think the odds are better that they're both gone than that either one of them stays next season. And so Russell Wilson, over these last 2 weeks, he needs just 2 touchdown passes to join Peyton Manning and Dan Marino as the only quarterbacks with 20-plus touchdown passes in each of their first 10 seasons. And so Wilson may be leaving Seattle, but likely leaving Seattle, but he can join that group, and he'll forever be a Seahawk in terms of that stat and those records. And then finally, our Monday Night Football game to the AFC North. Cleveland travels to Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers. This is Big Ben's likely final home game. He's all but said he's retiring after this year. It's a primetime game. It's on Monday Night Football, where he has posted a 110-plus passer rating in 3 of his last 4 appearances. Now, I don't think that Big Ben is still here, but maybe he can pull one last rabbit out of the hat, get the Steelers to 8 wins, keep them in a potential playoff conversation. I don't see this offense coming together. They haven't scored a first-half touchdown in 5 straight games, which hasn't happened since 1940. Cleveland can technically get into the playoffs if they went out and get some help, but they're floundering. Baker Mayfield is playing terribly. I think the chance that Pittsburgh has in this game is for Baker Mayfield to continue to make mistakes. Like he threw 3 interceptions in his first 5 drives last week. Ultimately, I don't think that happens. I think Cleveland takes advantage of the Steelers' poor rushing defense, and they ride Nick Chubb to a victory here. And so I'll take Cleveland, sending Big Ben out with a home loss on Monday Night Football in Week 17. Well, that's going to about wrap up our preview. Just want to give a few final thoughts here to wrap up the show. My first final thought is response to a tweet that I sent out about a week and a half ago. I tweeted out and told people to tell me their favorite NFL team, and I'll tell you how to fix that team in the offseason. And of course, the majority of my fan base are Eagles fans, and so that was the first one that came as a response. And so I just want to talk a few minutes about how I think the Eagles should approach this offseason. The first thing I think they need to do, they have to decide on the quarterback situation. And I think that Jalen Hurts has earned another year as the starter. Now, this is a team with massive cap penalties, with a rookie head coach and defensive play caller, and nobody realistically expected the Eagles to be making a push for the playoffs, and yet here they are, and they can even clinch in Week 17. I think Hurts needs to improve, but Hurts is also very young. I think you give him a shot. You drafted him in the second round. He's shown some progression, maybe not as much as you would like this year, but the Eagles have proved they can win with him. And so this isn't fix the rest of the team and then worry about the quarterback, because I think that's the wrong approach. But I think you can build a team, you can build a style to win with Hurts, and I think he's earned one more year. Now, that said, I would not spend all 3 first-round picks. I would trade one of those picks, trade out of the first round with one of the picks, and give yourself, you need an additional first next year. It gives you flexibility to make that quarterback decision next offseason and still sit with 2 first-round picks. So I'm trading a first for maybe like a second this year and a first next year, and I'm going to try to put that decision off a year. In the draft, I'm focusing on defense. The Eagles have needs all over the defense. They need a CB2. You've got Darius Slay, who's aging. You've got Avonte Maddox, who's good in the slot, but you need another outside corner. Maybe you can bring Steven Nelson back. He's fine. I don't think he's good. I don't think he's great. He's an average, maybe CB2. So if he would come back, that'd be great. But I think you need to get an outside corner. All the youth that they have are basically slot corners. You need safety help. Rodney McLeod is likely on his way out. And, what do the Eagles have at safety? They really don't have anything. So I'd like to see safety really prioritized. And, of course, the Eagles need help at edge rusher. They need help at linebacker, really everywhere on the defense. I'm focusing on the defense through the draft. The biggest thing that the Eagles need on the offensive side of the ball is an X receiver. They need a big-bodied X receiver, an Alshon Jeffrey type, a Devontae Adams type, who I think would be a great signing for the Eagles. Bringing in Devontae Adams to play with Devontae Smith would be a lot of fun. Getting that veteran presence in there. We know they've dialogued and bantered off the field before about how the right way to spell Devontae is. I would love to see him come in, but it doesn't have to be him. You could go sign somebody else, but I want to sign an X receiver, not draft one. The Eagles' entire skill position room is all young guys. I want a vet presence in there, someone that's established, someone that you know who he is, that you can trust to win those backside dig routes. And so you can start to work with Jalen Hurts on that. Okay, we're going to run a flood to the boundary, and we've got a backside dig, and you can trust that Devontae Adams or whoever is going to win off of that. And so if you don't like your look, bounce it. I don't think the Eagles have that now. It would also allow the Eagles to get Devonta Smith into the slot more, which is where I would like to see him, where he could utilize those two-way goes. You could also put him at the Y and put Rager in the slot, which I'm about done with Rager, but I think it would help him out a little bit more to be in the slot. So it'd give you a lot of flexibility. And I think that it would help maximize this Eagles offense, give Jalen Hurts a fair shot in 2022 to really win people, the front office, over. So that's how I would approach the offseason if I was the Eagles. Over the offseason, I want to do podcasts where we kind of break that down for a lot of teams. But if you're listening to this and, the Eagles aren't your team, you follow us for one of your other teams, shoot me a tweet, tweet at me on the Bird app on Twitter, and we'll put your team at the front of the list, and I kind of tell you what I think they should do this offseason. And then my final thought 2.0 is I just want to give a shout out to all the supporters, everyone who's listening to this podcast, everybody who follows me on Twitter, who has read my articles, who's retweeted me or who's liked my tweets, who's DM'd me. I really appreciate you guys. In 2019, I'm a teacher. In 2019, when COVID shut down schools, I found myself with a lot of free time. And so I contacted Vince Gwynn, a guy that I'd reached out to a long time ago when I first started a blog. And he was starting a project called The Spark, just a place for people to collaborate and do content. So I went to write about the NFL for him. And within like a couple of weeks, he put me in touch with the Painted Lines and got me on here. Dibes and Austin Krell and all those guys brought me in. And, I wrote for a year, and they really encouraged me to start podcasting and to get out there. And so, this year I've launched this podcast, and we're 34 episodes in, going strong, excited for the off season to get to do a lot more stuff. The draft is my bread and butter. The draft shows where I really started to feel comfortable on camera. And so I'm excited to get into that again. But it did that. I started the year with like 200 some Twitter followers. I got verified on Twitter, and I'm up to almost 650 now. And I couldn't do what I do without you guys following along. You guys are what makes it fun. And so I always try to comment back to all of the comments on my Twitter. If you DM me, I try to get back to you. I really enjoy interacting with you guys. I love doing these shows and getting the chance to talk to you guys about your thoughts. So just want to thank you guys. 2021 has been a crazy ride, and I'm really excited to see what 2022 has in store for me, has in store for this podcast, and has in store for the Eagles. So with all that said, thank you truly for joining me for episode number 34 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and I really hope that you guys do, be sure you smash that subscribe button so you don't miss our next episode. Drop me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Give me a follow on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. Tweet at me. You can tag me in things. I love to interact with you guys on there. You can follow my co-host, who's not here today, Mark Henry Jr., at Mark Henry Jr. _. And so for me, from Mark, from the Painted Lines, you guys are awesome, and we'll see you next time.